Well, good afternoon and welcome to our second episode of Vital Conversation Dialogues on Living and Dying Well. My name is Kim Adams and I'll be your host again today. And I just want to thank you for joining us again. We're in for a real treat today with Kathie Nitz, who's going to be sharing some really vital information. The title of this talk is Bridging the Generations Through Conversations. And so I know that we'll get plenty of tips and strategies from Kathie. Well, before I get started, let me just tell you a little bit about me. I am the founder and owner of Powerful You, end-of-life planning and coaching. So I work with families around end of life and the plans that they have and things that they want to be able to have the best life with the time that they have left. Certainly I'm your host for this webinar, and I'm also a hospice volunteer. And I just have a real passion for this end-of-life work. One of the reasons, or I should say more so one of my intentions for doing this work is to provide, or providing these webinars, is to provide an opportunity for dialogue, for opening the door to conversations. As we know, death and dying and end of life is not a subject that we talk about all the time, and so I feel that being able to open the door to these important conversations that are actually a natural part of life is important. And so my intention throughout this series is to really bring in various topics and speakers to be able to share different things so that we have choices, so that you know that there's choices and options available. Without options, without choices, we don't have the ability to make the best decisions for ourselves. So that's one of the reasons that this is so important to me, is to get out information that there's a lot of things that we'll be sharing over the coming months that I wasn't even aware of, and so being able to share that with the public is definitely one of my goals. So just a little housekeeping before we get started. We are live, and so technology is wonderful when it works, and we certainly do not anticipate any problems at all. But just know that if for some reason your screen should freeze or the sound goes a little wonky, 9 times out of 10, just refresh your browser, and that should just bring everything back clear again. If for some reason Kathie and I get dropped off, we will get back on as soon as possible, but certainly we don't foresee any problems. You'll notice on the right-hand side of your screen there's a chat, so feel free to type any comments, questions, anything as we have our dialogue that you're interested in, and certainly go ahead now, say hello, and let us know where you're listening in from. That would be great. And again, like I said, just know that that's your way to kind of communicate with us throughout this webinar. So I guess without any further ado, let's just begin. So this is the month of February, the month of love, but I'm not talking about the romantic, kind of Valentine's thing. Really, this is not the superficial. This is more like the heart connection. And I think from our call today, you'll really feel that come through strongly. Kathie is certainly one of the caregivers and one of the special people that really leads with her heart. And you'll hear that come through today in the information and the strategies that she has to share with us. And loving our caregivers, our care partners, our elders, our aged family members, is one way that we really can celebrate them during this month. And so with respectful, honest, courageous, and crucial conversations, it really does show, our love for them and their journey and what the end of life means to them and what that looks like for them. So again, this is some of the information that you're going to be hearing today from Kathie as we move along in our conversation. She's going to help us identify some strategies and tips and things for navigating that. She has a special role as a caregiver, and she'll share a lot more about that. So, all right, let me read Kathie's official bio, and then we'll get started. So Kathie Nitz is a life strategist and inspirational speaker, and most important to her, she's the caregiver for her mom with dementia. She, as a specially trained life and relationship coach and a certified senior advisor, Kathie skillfully helps her clients find clarity and choice during life transitions, and she specializes in helping adult children to navigate the challenges of elder care with their eyes and their hearts wide open. See, already the heart piece. Through her speaking, she shares stories, ideas, and tools that motivate and empower. Kathie has also created products and services, including caring cards, which we'll hear more about, that promote meaningful connection and provide an opportunity to preserve a loved one's legacy. And you'll see Kathie's website, which will be below her name when I pop her in, but it's www.kathienitz.com or www.caringcards.com, and you'll see that, and we'll also put that in the chat. Okay, so let's welcome Kathie. Thank you so much.
Hi, Kim. Thank you. What a beautiful introduction about the topic and coming from the heart base. That's so nice. Thank you. And it's a privilege to be here on this cold, snowy day. Big surprise, right?
Yes. Yes.
So I'm so grateful to be here. Hi, everybody. And one of the most important things to me today is really to have a conversation, even though we're not in the same room, to really feel like you're having a conversation with me. It's really important. So please feel free to ask questions, and we'll try to answer them as best we can. So, so what I'd really like to do, Kim, I think what really helps is to be able to tell a little bit about my story, about how I got here, because I think it lays the foundation for why I'm doing what I'm doing, how I was inspired by it, and then we'll springboard off of that. Would that be all right?
Absolutely, that's perfect. Yeah, I'd love to have our guests begin with sharing your story and how you got into this. So yeah, go for it.
Okay. All right, great. So I was born and raised in Northwest Indiana, just outside Chicago. And after my sister and I got married, I moved east to be with my husband, and she moved west to be with hers. And my mom, who was widowed, when she retired, she chose to go out to the West Coast to live near my sister because her grandchildren were out there. And she was out there for about 9 years, and out of the blue, I got a call that my sister was going to be moving to California. And my mom made it known pretty quick that she really had no interest in going to California and really wanted to come out and live by me at that point in her life. So she'd been in the Seattle area for 9 years. So she moved out here to Connecticut, and it was interesting. Becoming her caregiver suddenly was a surprise, and it was a bit daunting because we'd really always had a kind of a challenging relationship. We ruffled feathers and butted heads, and had some challenges along the way. So the prospects of being her caregiver was, like I said, daunting, I guess is the best word to use for it. So she came out, and at that point I was not a coach yet. And so when she came out, I did the best I could, as many of us do. We get the phone call, the dominoes start falling, and then that's what we do. And so what happened is she came out, and we navigated a lot of challenges, and I trampled all over her in a lot of ways with the best of intentions, trying to help her, but really kind of taking over and feeling like she really needed me to do things. Right. And when she first moved out here, she wanted to live in an assisted living community, and she had just the early signs of dementia and was walking with a cane. And then I transitioned her into their memory care unit, and she started using a walker. And then she actually had some brain surgery after she'd been out here about 5 or 6 years due to some falls, and she wound up then in a nursing home where she is now with advanced dementia. So I've navigated that whole journey with her from being relatively independent to now being in a nursing home. So it's been an interesting journey, and there are a lot of things I learned along the way. About 3 years after she moved out here, I decided to take my coach's training. And Kim, your coach, life coaches training changed me. A year later, I took relationship coaches training, and that absolutely not only transformed my life, but it also transformed the way I showed up as a caregiver. It just taught me different ways of looking at things. It taught me different ways of communicating with her. And as I saw the change in the way I showed up, I saw the change in the way she responded. And so that's why I was inspired to really start helping caregivers, was because of the things that I had learned. And so what I then decided was, as I started coaching caregivers, they started asking me a lot of questions about, for instance, I talk a lot about the being part of being a caregiver. And there's also the doing part of it. So when they started talking to me about the doing part, that's when I sought out my Certified Senior Advisor designation, to be able to give responsible information to back that up. And then finally, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, finally I was inspired to come up with Caring Cards, a product that really promotes meaningful conversation. And we'll get into more detail about that later. So many of you, I'm talking about being a caregiver, and what we're talking about today is really the broader umbrella about bridging the generations. But the perspective I am going to come from is the caregiving perspective. But I want you to know that these are tips that can be used in any relationship, whether it's with significant other, with elders, whomever. So while my perspective might be as a caregiver with mom with dementia, just know that these are things that will help you along the way. So.
It's great information, Kathie. Yes, you come from the space with your mom and caregiving, but you're absolutely correct that I think a lot of what you're going to share is applicable to many of the listeners that could really benefit from this. So great. So shall we jump in to some of the important and crucial conversations that you mentioned that we want to talk about today?
Absolutely. That sounds great, Kim. And just as we do, I had mentioned to you, there's something that I think is really important. And this is whether you're a caregiver now, if you just see your parents or your loved ones getting older. There's something that I want to share, and it's one of the offers that Kim is going to put out there for you. And I think it's really helpful because it lays the groundwork for the conversations. And to me, that's the vision. So, we spend so much time planning parties and graduations and showers and all kinds of things, but we really do caregiving or elder care by the seat of our pants. We just sort of respond to what's already happening. And so as I started watching people do that, I realized that oftentimes they had strengths or skills or ideas that just never really surfaced because, again, they were flying by the seat of their pants and just trying to keep up with what was happening. So the offer I'm having that Kim will put out there it's called What's My Vision, and it's the caregiver version. Now, again, it says caregiver, but if you see your parents are aging, I highly recommend that you even just start looking at this, grandparents, whomever you might be watching. And there's just a lot of questions on it. You can look at it when you download it. But it's things like, what is my vision of care for my loved one? What role will I assume in my loved one's care? How can I best support them? And then the other one is actually for the care recipient. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later. But I highly encourage you, for instance, like with my mom, I knew that I wanted her to feel safe, loved, and supported. I know the things she loves. She loves fresh air and sunshine. So if I could hold those things while I was making the decisions and while I interact with her as we get into the conversations, it creates a structure for me that makes it all less scary. So I just want to add that for all of you. And now we'll actually get into the conversation, because what happens is this becomes like the compass to help you in your conversations. So the first one of my biggest points that I do when I have speaking engagements, and it's one of the tips that I give, it's about how to speak with loved ones in a way that opens conversation and doesn't shut it down. And oftentimes we don't realize the way we start conversations, how we really shut them down. And so a lot of what we're going to talk about today are about that, about keeping the flow. So one of the things I want to mention is interact versus react, or sometimes I call it get curious, not furious. And that seems to resonate a lot with people I speak with. And these are all tips, again, that are good in every aspect of your life. So, use them wherever you can. So oftentimes when something's happening, we react to it. We react to it, and we're reacting to what already happened. And so learning to get curious, it's really counterintuitive, but learning to get curious and interacting and leaning into that person and asking questions is so beneficial. I can't even tell you how much it really helps. So, for instance, one of the things I'll often say specifically is, help me understand. So whether it's my husband or whether it's my mom, it's a great technique to say, help me understand your perspective. Help me understand what you're feeling right now. Help me understand, rather than making assumptions, which we can oftentimes do. So I'll give you an example. There's a loved one, an aging loved one that we know in our family, and she has had quite a few falls, which can happen as people age. And so we've been trying to get her to get Lifeline, and I'm sure if many of you, if we're talking about bridging generations, then you have elders in your life, I'm sure, and she just will not agree to that. So she's had a number of falls, and she recently fell and wound up in the bathroom on the floor with her head cut open for about 3 or 4 hours and said she thought she was going to die. Now, I don't know about you, but I would pretty much think that'd be a good time to get Lifeline. And when I asked her about it, she said, "Oh, no, I'm not ready for that." Now, there could have been a way to react to that and start saying, "What do you mean you're not going to get it?" Right, Kim? I mean, that's just a natural thing that
Absolutely.
happens. Right. What do you mean? What are you talking about? You have to get this. You have to. You must. But by asking her, help me understand, if you thought you were dying and you were laying there for that long, if not now, when? And then by opening that up, I mean, her response right now isn't necessarily important, but it opened up dialogue. So rather than making her wrong and shutting her down, she actually did tell me all the reasons why she didn't think it was appropriate. And some we were able to explain to her, some of her misconceptions. But by being open and getting curious, it really helped me gain better understanding.
That's great. I mean, really, and you're speaking about creating the space, right? Setting the environment for her to really say what it is.
Right.
Why she did. Yeah. So beautiful.
It really helps. So remember, get curious, not furious. It really does help. It helps in all kinds of situations. And we could go on and on. I mean, I could deep dive into any of these. So we're going to just touch on them. But please, anybody, if you have questions or if we want to return to something, I'm happy to do it. The other thing that I was just talking about, too, and many of you may know this technique, but I can't emphasize it enough. It's using I versus you. So when you say let me start over again. I don't know about you, but when someone says, "You better, you always, you never," it feels like someone's just pointing their finger right in your face. And oftentimes people get very prickly and defensive, right? I mean, it's a natural thing when people start a sentence with you. And so by being able to understand what it is you're feeling, taking a moment to check in with yourself, and to be able to speak from that place of I, then you're coming from that place of pure intention. And you talk about the heart, Kim, but it's coming from that place inside of me. I want you to understand this, so I want to say this. So an example I have was when my mom was in the hospital, and they had a sitter with her. And they came in and said, we can't give a sitter to her anymore. And it was a very difficult situation. I mean, she just had brain surgery, she had dementia, there were a lot of things going on. And by saying, "Could I talk to you out in the hallway?" And I said to her, "What do you need from me? How can we make this work? How can we help? We're part of the team. I want to be part of the team. How can we make this better?" And so by being able to be open and not say, "Well, what do you mean you can't have a sitter? What do you mean you're going to, put restraints on my mom? What do you mean?" Like getting on the defensive, I was able to talk to her. We talked the whole thing through, and they came up with a solution. But by being a part of the team and saying, "I'm concerned, I'm afraid this is what's going to happen," she was able to understand where I was coming from. So that's just one example. I mean, Kim, I don't know if you have other examples that you want to give, or but that whole I versus you, I think, is really crucial in any relationship, especially with the generations.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you, Kathie, in terms of, being able to allow the, our care partner to really have a voice, as well as the rest of the team. So I think that, you bring up a really great point that, a lot of times we have our agenda, but it's like, well, wait a minute, what really is needed, and what does, our loved one want? So great examples. I love that. Yeah.
And we're quick hitting all these things, but I think you'll get the idea of it. But the next subject that we wanted to talk about was that we can't honor our loved one's wishes if we don't know what they are. So ask them. And as simple as that sounds, and I don't even necessarily mean purely as a caregiver, but as we see our loved ones aging, again, this is about conversation. These are all planning conversations we're talking about right now. We'll get into heart and relationship conversations in a minute. These are planning. So we go to our loved one's home and we see maybe that things are changing, maybe they're not keeping up with things, maybe they're not taking care of things the way they do. We can come in sometimes and try to take over with the best of intentions. I mean, I used to do it all the time. I'd fly into my mom's door when she was over at the assisted living and start doing her dishes, and she'd get so prickly, and I couldn't figure out why until I took my coach's training and realized I was trampling all over her. And so even when we have the best of intentions sometimes, and if they don't tell us what they want it to look like, then we can't help them. And I know that many elders, their biggest fear is that their loved ones will come in and start making decisions for them and start taking over for them. That's one of their biggest fears. And so that's oftentimes why they're so resistant to change or to hearing a perspective or to, just hearing an opinion about something. And so what would be great is to ask them, like, what do you want your future to look like? And that's one of the sheets, too, that's included in that What's My Vision. It's really for them to fill out. They may or may not do it, but you can ask them. So that loved one that I was talking about with the lifeline, she is needing more care than they're able to handle right now. And, she and her spouse. And so I said to her, well, what do you want it to look like? You're holding this together right now, and what do you want it to look like moving forward? Well, you wouldn't believe all the information I got from her just by asking that question. I could have made assumptions or said, you need a wheelchair, you need this, you can't do this, you better this. But by asking her that question, she very specifically told me, oh, well, I want this person to come take care of me. And I want this. I said, great, well, have you had a dialogue with that person? Well, no. Great, well, this would be a great time to do it. So it's a great time to ask them these questions. Ask them, what role can I play? How can I help you achieve that? Because what happens then is we don't go flying in. We come in and we support them. And so that's just, to me, a really important component of the planning conversations.
Excellent points, Kathie. And I so agree with you in terms of what you said about that, our elders and our loved ones really feel that, we're going to come in and take over. And so, yeah, that's a huge barrier right there for them to want to be able to kind of offer things, but when we can come from the perspective of, asking them what it is and being able to let them know that, no, we're not here to take over, but we want to know. If they don't tell us, as you said, we don't know. So, yeah, I think that's great. That's great.
And also opening the dialogue, Kim, allows us to see gaps in their thinking, in their cognitive abilities. If they say something that doesn't seem reasonable, it's a great opportunity. If we come in and take over, we're really marginalizing them and sort of diminishing their capacity to be able to tell us. And even my mom, at this point, with very advanced dementia, she can still tell me in a lot of ways, non-verbally or verbally, what she wants. And it's because I wait and I listen. I've trained myself to allow her perspective and her voice, whether it's verbal or nonverbal, to matter. So that's just a very important thing, and I know what matters to her, so I can honor that instead of doing, as you said before, what I think is right. I'm not coming in with an agenda because I think this is the way it should be. I kind of blend the two, but I wouldn't have that if I hadn't asked her and didn't have some type of clarity on what she wanted, and also clarity on how do I want to show up as a caregiver. What am I able to do? And you'll see that on that download.
Yes, yeah, and I just it's a little bit further down, but just to kind of also talk about the point that you just made. When my grandmother was dying about 20 years ago, she was in the hospital and went in pretty not an emergency situation and just continuously got ill over the month. And I remember 3 days before her passing, the chaplain stood at the doorway, and I was there, and one, maybe two of her other daughters were there, and she looked up at him and she said, "Are you here to give me last rites?" And instead of the three of us jumping in,
right,
we all just stepped back and just waited to see what she was going to say, or waited to see. And he said, "Mary, do you want last rites?" And she looked around at us again, looking for some confirmation, affirmation. Are they going to jump in, or are they going to tell me what I should do? We all just were silent, and she said, "Oh, okay." Because in her heart of hearts, I think she really knew, but in some ways we gave the power to her to make that decision for herself. And, as hard as it was, but, she knew. So I think, again, it's just another example of giving them the opportunity to make the decisions that are important for them. So that was just another example that I thought I'd share in addition to the ones that you've talked about.
Oh, Kim,
Yeah.
it was a wonderful example because that's it. And you used the word creating space earlier. I mean, it really is, especially when like again through the generations, people who were trying to communicate with and build rapport and trust again with. You're right. If we come in and we come, full force and really trample over them, then it really makes the relationship more constricted. There's less trust. And there can often be more conflict. So that's a great example of, even though I'm sure there are lots of things you wanted to say, by being able to just be quiet and give her that space to really give the example. That's beautiful. Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Sure, sure. And I just wanted to, before we jump in, go further, it looks like there's just a couple of comments here that I was wondering if you just want to respond to. So Neil, thank you. He says, if I understand you correctly, we need to find a way for our loved ones to tell us what they want done or not done for medical care goals and steps they want known and taken. And then he provides us a website for that as well. So did you want to comment on that?
Yes, absolutely, Neil. So and I kind of categorize a little bit. So yes, a lot of that is the doing part. So there's like a 5 wishes, something called 5wishes.com. There are, of course, wills and things that can specifically legally and specifically talk about those types of things. So absolutely make sure that your loved ones have those. Make sure you do. Make sure you've updated them. They change all the time. In addition to that, the sheet that I was talking to you about that you can download is a lot about the being part of it. So it could be, for instance, the type of environment. Like I just recently told my husband, after taking care of being with my mom so much, I said, you know what? If I'm ever at a point where I cannot communicate to you, I want you to know that sunshine and fresh air matter to me. So I want you to know that if that ever happens and you have to make decisions for me, know that that matters to my spirit. So it's the things that are important tangibly and like the doing part of it, and it's also just that's part of what I want it to look like. That's what I want my process to look like moving forward if I need to be cared for. So I hope that answers the question, or at least gives a little more context.
Sure,
Thank
that
you,
sounds
Neil.
great. Thank you. And Kimberly writes that begintheconversation.org provides resources for advanced care planning for caregivers as well. So again, more of the doing. And then we have a comment here from Pashta. I think that many of us are afraid that we will be asked or expected to do something that we don't want to do, so we don't ask. We may forget that there is an ongoing discussion, i.e., just because something is asked doesn't mean that we have to do it.
Brilliant. Exactly. That's absolutely true. And that's oftentimes, it's not only we don't ask because we don't want to know, we're afraid to be dragged into something. It's recognizing that I'm at choice in every moment. My mom is at choice in every moment. My family is at choice at every moment. So it's about, like you said, being willing, again, eyes and heart wide open, walking into it, asking the questions, and trusting myself that I can have the conversation. And by modeling that, you become a ripple in the pond. It's really beautiful because my mom really started to respond more and more and more and trust me more and more and more. The more I could show up and unflinchingly ask a question from that place, like I say, always of pure intention. So yes, they're all right on track. And I thank you all for your comments. Thank you.
Yes, great. Well, that seems like a nice segue, Kathie, into the heart conversation.
Right, exactly. Well, I want to do, and there's only one thing, Kim, that I want to go back to before we do that, because it's that convincing doesn't work. And the reason we want to do that, it's a key point, and then we'll definitely go to the heart conversations.
Great.
It's a very quick point I want to make. One of the things we do a lot with anybody, and especially our elders, is trying to convince them. We tell them what they should do. We tell them, well, this is why you need to do it. I kind of liken it to, have you ever gone out to lunch with a friend? And the friend sits the whole time and tells you all the things that are wrong and how they really, they just can't believe this is all going on. And you spend the whole time telling them, try this, do this, do this. And you walk away and they feel so much lighter, and you get in the car and you go, first of all, you're exhausted. And then you get back with them the next month and they're in the same exact place. Well, the reason that happens oftentimes is because they were your suggestions. You're trying on some level to kind of convince them that this will work. It's the same with our elders. It's the same with conversing with them. So I'm going to give you a quick example, and then we'll move on to the heart. So my mom was transitioning from being independent to sort of starting to need some help with her medications. And she was just, as many of them are, very determined to keep doing her own thing. And so I would go over and I'd see her pill holder, and maybe one day was empty, like Sunday was empty, Monday, Tuesday had something in it, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it was empty. And I would look at it and wonder, did she take it? Did she didn't take it? What's going on? Now, I could have said, look at this, made her wrong and told her, you have to start doing this and you have to start doing that. So I did something which, Kim, you know too probably, is alignment coaching. So I said to her, gosh, Mom, do you see this? You know, this day's full, this day's empty, this day's full, and I'm concerned. I want to make sure that you're taking your medication. Not you're not taking your medication, but I want to be sure that you are. And she said, oh, I am. And I said, well, I understand that you think you are, but can you understand why this would be confusing to me? And she said, well, yes. So I put it out in front of us both, like out in front of us, and said, okay, so looking at that, what's the solution? And then just stop, right? So the difference is, like you were talking about earlier, Kim, I created this, even though I know what I wanted to have happen, which was to have a nurse come in and dispense the medications, I didn't want my mom to feel like those decisions were being made for her. So by having her be a part of the team, it allowed us to come up with a solution that she was willing to try. And so that's just a point I wanted to make. It's about not, you know, convincing doesn't work. It just doesn't. And so find ways to really find alignment and work together as a team. Be side by side looking forward instead of butting heads face to face. So I just wanted to make sure we covered that point.
No, that's great. No, I think that's a very important point that you bring up. Absolutely.
And that's true in any relationship. So these are all things, again, that can really help you in all areas. So shall we?
Shall we? Let's jump into the heart conversations. Yes, yes.
So to me, I mean, this is really the core. I mean, those are more opening the conversation, but these I think are just so important to me. Again, I can't say it enough, caregiving with your eyes and heart wide open. A lot of times when you talk to caregivers or to people who are watching their loved ones approaching where they might have to care for them, there's a real, oh, you know, oh, it's so sad, it's this, it's that, or they don't want to look at it, or they get together at family gatherings and they see the changes, but no one wants to talk about it. You know, no one wants to say anything. Kind of going back to the point that from the gal, and I'm sorry, I can't remember her name, but about being afraid that they're going to have to be dragged into it.
Right, Pashta.
Yeah, Pashta, thank you. And so one of the things that Kim and I talked about that we thought was so important when we were kind of coming up with the topic was being willing to be comfortable with the discomfort. And so we're going to talk about that in a few ways. And so the first thing I want to say is whether it's watching someone age or whether, in my case, like I said, sometimes I'll give examples about being specifically a caregiver, but you'll still be able to see the overarching theme. This is her journey. And people find that hard to understand what I'm saying there, but it's her journey is being almost 88 years old and having dementia. And what happens oftentimes as we watch anybody, whatever age, if they're sick or if something's happening, we're afraid to talk about it or we get so entrenched in it. And so the point I want to make is about my journey is to be her daughter, to be her loved one witnessing it, to be present for her, to love her, to be a fierce advocate for her. But it's not my journey. Mine is still yet to be determined. And so oftentimes, again, this is not necessarily conversation of the words, but this is what we're talking about, the conversations of the heart. It's understanding my role in it, understanding that it's not mine to take on. And Kim, we talked a little bit about that. Is there anything you want to add, or do you feel like the point is clear in terms of the heart conversation?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's a fine line of what is your role in your relationship and realizing that, you know, as much as you care and love for your mom or for any of us if we're a caregiver, there's the different relationships, and what role are you playing? So I think, you described that really nicely, Kathie. And that's a really fine line to dance with. And, there's times that it may get a little muddy, and there's times where it may feel confusing. But I think the important piece is to know that really is the piece. This is your journey, this is your mom's journey, this is, so-and-so's journey, and it's their loved one's journey. And being aware of that, I think, and just even acknowledging that, just saying, what, sometimes this is hard, what role am I playing? So yeah, good point.
Well, and I laid that groundwork with that first also, because I think it folds into a lot of the other things we're going to talk about in these heart journeys. So it goes back to that vision. If I know I'm her daughter, and I'm kind of like be the advocate in things, that it helps me communicate better in other ways. So the other thing, again, is sort of the duality of sadness and joy coexisting. So sometimes, again, that gets lost in the conversation. And a lot of what we're talking about right now are the nonverbal conversation, a lot of the nonverbal communication that I personally feel are actually even more crucial than some of the words, because I don't know about you, but if you've ever walked into a room and you can get a vibe in the room instantly, I mean, our loved ones, they can sense that a mile away. And so getting right on the inside, having the heart conversation with yourself and your loved one really makes a huge difference. So an example I was going to say was that duality of sadness and joy. So my mom is in a nursing home. That's the care that is required for her now for the many reasons, not just the dementia. And oftentimes I'll get off the elevator and I'll make the right-hand turn, and there she'll be, the dreaded vision that you don't want to see, your loved one in the hallway in the wheelchair. And I say that because a lot of people that's their vision of what it's like to be in a nursing home. They have that horrible vision. So immediately I get that wave of, when I was first getting used to it, it was a very difficult thing to see. However, if I stopped myself, if I let that feeling come over me, and then I looked out and I realized she had a joyful look on her face. My mom was always lonely. And so to be out in the hallway and she's busy telling the nurses that they should be fired or they should take care of this or they should do that, she's actually quite happy and engaged. And so the point of that is to be aware of that internal heart conversation that's going on for you, what we start doing, what we see, what we start telling ourselves. We can walk up and start reacting in a way instead of taking that moment and saying, well, what else am I hearing inside? Yes, I do see that, but what else do I see? Well, I see that actually in a lot of ways she's engaged and she's content. So, don't give your feelings a home. That's the most important thing. Let them wash over you. And again, these are conversations because they're the internal conversations that are going on that then impact our external conversations with our loved one.
Great points, Kathie. That whole piece about the feelings, allow them, acknowledge them, but as you say, allow them to wash over you. There's a lot of grief that also can come in through this. And, we know that, not acknowledging or stuffing or denying what we're feeling can, cause other issues that aren't so positive. So as you said, acknowledging them, but allowing them to wash over you. And also, what frame of mind are you coming in with? Are you coming in with, this is the reality, but where do I find the sunshine? Where do I find the glass half full? And as you said, wow, your mom is just having a great time. Right. But you could have made up a story that was so not even appropriate based on how you were feeling. So that's wonderful. Nice.
Well, thanks, Kim. And it's, like I said, it's that internal conversation that happens that then impacts our external conversations.
Yes.
And talking about, piggybacking on what you were just talking about, Kim, there's something that I'm actually going to read, if it's all right, because
sure.
I'm going to lay the groundwork, and it's just a little paragraph. And it's something that actually came up as we were planning this whole thing, and you pointed back to it and said this might be a good topic to bring up. So what happens oftentimes when I'm visiting my mom is I look for, like we said, all the things that are going on. So when you're with your loved ones, when you're with people that you're trying to bridge the generations, you're trying to communicate with them, there are going to be difficult times, and there can also be joyful moments. In addition to that, it's really important for us to be able to be vulnerable and open. It goes back to the heart conversation with ourselves and with other people. So recently, and I'll read this and give some other examples, but I was visiting my mom and we were having a lovely time and I was looking for the joy in it, but at the same time she was having swallowing difficulties. And it was very sad to me because that has to do with the progression of the disease and it's scary. Now, if I just focused on that, that's all she would sense from me, and I would be anxious and she would be anxious. But if I see it and I understand it and I know that it's part of this journey, but I can still find the joy, it helps balance it all out. And so it just normalizes it all. We're just this little boat, the two of us, when I'm there visiting with her, just kind of riding the tides from moment to moment. If she cries in a moment or if she's laughing in a moment or can't swallow in a moment, we're just riding these little waves together. And so the thing I wanted to share was after I got out of there, I felt compelled to write about it because I was feeling so many emotions. I was feeling joy, I was feeling conflicted, I was feeling sad, I was feeling all these things. And I've often been the kind of person that would just kind of soldier on, I'll go ahead and just do it on my own. And so I wrote something, and I think it's important because I think it'll give you an idea of how you can have the heart conversations with friends, with other people who can help you. So if I may, if that's all right, Kim?
Sure, go ahead.
Just a paragraph. So I wrote down, every visit brings, excuse me, my throat, excuse me for 1 second. Got dry there.
I just want to acknowledge, thank you for keep typing in, and we'll get to some of your comments in just a minute, but thank you. This is great.
Wonderful. So I'll do this and then we'll take a little cut in. So this is what I wrote. I said, every visit brings new joys and also the inherent and ongoing challenges of dementia, which I unflinchingly see and deal with, yet choose not to dwell on. Sometimes after I leave her, meaning my mom, it feels bigger than me. So today I'm asking that you help me hold my mom in love and light and envision that she will continue to thrive in spite of the progression of her dementia and remain comfortable and peaceful and able to feel love and experience the purest of joys all the days of her life. While our journey is deeply intimate, sharing special moments with you, meaning my Facebook friends and family, provides an opportunity to bring supportive energy back into our space. I thank you for this gift. It means more than you can imagine. And the reason I bring that up is because that's a conversation of the heart too. When we're going through things, oftentimes we either hold it in or we give a home to the negative and we gripe about things. But what I'm looking at is my vision. See, that goes back to my vision, to hold her in love and light, to bring that back into her space. I knew I needed that. I wanted that in our space. And by reaching out and asking my friends and family, I just got so many beautiful responses. And one of them was that, I hope you know that what an example that is. And thank you for focusing on the beautiful moments. And so, again, conversations of the heart. It's okay to feel deeply about something, and it's okay to ask for help and to bring that energy in. I have one other real quick example on that, Kim, about one time when my mom was in a nursing home and they called late at night, very late at night. My husband was out of town. I'd been there all day. I was exhausted. And I had a new friend in the area, just knew for a couple years. And they said, can you please come back over? There's something we need you to help us with. And I hung up the phone and I just said out loud, I can't do this on my own, which I'd never said before, but it was the conversation from my heart. I can't do this alone. I picked up the phone. It was 10 o'clock at night. I called my friend and I said, will you meet me at this nursing home? And she said, absolutely. And she showed up with Kleenex in her pocket, and then we sat on the couch in the lobby area for about 10 minutes while I just boo-hooed and got it all out. And then the two of us went together into my mom's. But that's a conversation of the heart. By being able to ask a friend, to be vulnerable, to ask what I needed for, I was then able to show up from a place of more wellness and more wholeheartedness for my mom, which then, of course, transformed that interaction. So.
Beautiful, beautiful examples, Kathie. I love that. And, by reaching out, no, I didn't hear you say anyone was trying to fix anything.
Right.
They weren't trying to take away anything. They were just allowing you to be able to feel that. And so then, as you said, then you were in a space to be able to show up differently the next time you encountered your mom, or to, go home and be with your husband. So, yeah, that's beautiful. And so many times we think, if we reach out, they're going to tell us what to do. No, just allowing and being vulnerable with people that you feel comfortable and safe with. And again, no one was trying to fix anything. And I remember beautifully that post that you put on Facebook and all the beautiful comments of support, that we wouldn't have had the opportunity to support you if you hadn't reached out. So,
Well,
yeah.
that's it, Kim. And you said, like, because I'm not asking for solution, I'm asking for something specific, a vision that I have for her. People were able to respond in a way that gave back to that vision. So, so did you have some things there that you wanted to?
Yeah, so let me just get back to the chat here. And it looks like Stephen said, yes, peacefulness is not so much about the removal of all the wounds, but a removal of the negative ways that we treat wounded people.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, thank you. Pashta says respond rather than react. Yes, great,
Yes.
great. Yeah, nice. Then there was one other comment here. I know back, let's see, Uma had a comment here. I just helped an elder open the door to those conversations. She was in a lot of fear, but didn't know how to ask those questions. She and I were able to have some in-depth talks about death and afterlife, and she passed peacefully 3 days ago.
Oh,
So,
that gave me goosebumps, Uma. That's beautiful. See, by allowing open conversation, I mean, sometimes we think they don't want to talk about it. They think we don't want to talk about it. My in-laws, we were just having some conversations with them, and they just weren't used to talking to us about these things, about planning and things. And finally, my mother-in-law said later, you know what I realized? We never had to have these conversations with our aging loved ones because of the way they passed or the ages that they were. So we never got to this point with our loved ones. And so even that, her being able to understand that our wanting to ask questions and support them was new to her, but she realized that she had to kind of surrender to the fact that, oh, maybe that's part of the process, but I just never experienced it before. So it's very important.
right.
There's
We just
one.
have.
Oh, sure.
Sorry, we just had one more that just came in
Please.
here from Peg, who's actually a home funeral guide here in the Boston area. Two difficulties, she says, with her 90-year-old dad in Pennsylvania. Being at a distance is hard. Also having siblings who do not want to be in that loving conversation. It's hard to be just you by herself without everyone present.
You know, there's a lot of truth to that, and what I will say is, my mom and I are here on the East Coast. My sister's on the West Coast, so it's everybody shows up the way they can show up. Here's something I learned a long time ago. I tell people who are talking about what you're saying, where I show up one way and other people don't show up the other way, or they're not around. I'm in this alone, and you still have a choice. You still have a choice. And so the way you show up, like for me, everybody taking care of my mom would show up in a different way. When I recognize that the way I show up for my mom is the way I want to show up for my mom, it goes back to the vision, it goes back to who I am as a person, it allowed me to let go of how everyone else should be showing up. Everyone has a right to show up the way they want to show up and be involved as much as they want. This is where the conversation piece comes in. It's disappointing if you have siblings in your case who aren't showing up. And it's important for you to not just give up on them. To still be willing to check in with yourself and say, where do I need support right now? What am I not asking for that I could ask for? What am I willing to let go of and ask for help on? So much of it comes back to us, really, about getting clear on, I'm stretched so thin I can't do this anymore. So the question is, so who else can? And who have you asked? And are you willing to ask it? So, distance is a challenging thing. And there are also people who can support you. But it's really important to really, oh, I love that. Is that a train?
Yes, it's a train.
I'm sorry, a total segue, but I grew up with a train rail line nearby, and I love the sound of trains. That's beautiful in there. It takes me back to my childhood. But anyway, so it's just important to recognize that you're always at choice. And so even if you feel like you're alone and no one's helping, recognize where your choices are, what you haven't asked for, what you want to ask for, and just kind of stay in your own place and show up the way you need to. So I hope that helps.
Great.
And there's one other point under this, unless you've got or 2 points, and then we'll go on to the relationship piece.
Sure, we just had one other piece around, Alice said in terms of the connections, as you were talking about, that she's had some meetings over Skype to have conversations, so that kind of bridges the geography. So
Perfect
just another
solution.
way. Yeah.
Yep, perfect
Great.
solution. And we'll get to also when we get to the relationship, which will be a much quicker portion. We'll give you some ideas on how to do that long distance. So that's a great reminder. So the last two things about the honesty part, or the heart conversations, I wanted to quickly cover. This one I think is important. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. So we all know that. But be aware of how important that is, especially with aging loved ones. They're more vulnerable. They're a little more raw. They're a little more delicate in the sense that they're waiting for everybody to tell them how to do everything. I don't mean necessarily that they're physically less able or cognitively less able, but they feel more vulnerable, I think, oftentimes when we try to come in. So, you know, it's important, going back to the I versus you, to be able to open conversation instead of shutting conversation down. And I think you used the word earlier, Kim, but to be courageous and be honest. And I know one time, I'll always remember this. It just always chokes me up when I hear it, but one time my mom said to me when I was caring for her, when she could still kind of put together more complete thoughts, she said, "You always tell me the truth with velvet on it." And
Mm.
I will never forget her saying that, because what I realized was that was the shift for me after taking the relationship coaches training. Before that, I used to be honest with her. But I learned how to be honest from that place of pure intention. What is it really I'm wanting to say? What is it I'm trying to accomplish? And how do I say that in a loving, respectful fashion? So try to tell the truth with velvet on it. And then finally, just real quickly, this I think is really key as well. So often when we're with people, for instance, I'll use an example of my mom because it's the easiest way for me to really illustrate it. Any given moment, she's in a different place. She'll be happy, like I said, she'll be weepy one moment, she'll be this, she'll be that, and I so often see, this is what I see oftentimes, Mom, what's wrong? I'll watch other people. What's wrong? What are you sad about? What's the matter? I'm here. You know, they start talking at them and trying to talk them out of their feelings. The other day, my mom started getting weepy, and I just looked at her and I said, "I can see you're really full of emotions." That's it. Stop. Didn't say another thing.
Mm.
And she just sat there, and her eyes welled up, and she started to cry, and she said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, you know what? I'm really full of gratitude right now because we're together." And she said, "Yes." But do you see, instead of saying, "Why are you sad?" which, by the way, as you know, Kim, that will spiral her right into sadness.
Sure.
Even if she, can't explain it to me. So just by saying, "I can see you're full of emotions," I'm naming that I see something going on to her. But we're very, very quick to put labels on things. Why are you mad? Why are you sad? Why are you upset? So you can say, "Gosh, I can sense something. I can sense something going on for you. What are you feeling right now?" Leave it more open-ended, and you will be so surprised at what they'll tell you, and you'll be so surprised at how they'll relax and start trusting you even more.
Mm. Great. Great. Really great tips, Kathie. We've covered so much too, and we're almost to the top of the hour. But yeah, I would love for you to continue on, and we can jump into the last section of the relationship and legacy.
Perfect. And so to me, the relationship and the legacy, it goes into all these different components, and this ties into the whole thing. So Kim mentioned that I was inspired to create caring cards, which I told you about, and I was inspired because as my mom's dementia, it was originally because her dementia was progressing, and if any one of you have been out there with someone with dementia, you know that there's a lot of repetition. We'd go to lunch, and she'd ask me 15 times in 10 minutes if we'd ordered lunch. And it got to be very nerve-wracking for me. And I would have just seen her the day before, so sometimes I just didn't have conversation in me. And yet I knew I wanted to visit with her. I knew I wanted to connect with her. And so I came up with the idea, as a coach, that's what we do. We ask questions, right? So I thought, well, gosh, what are some things I want to know about her? How can I take the pressure off myself to perform and to converse and to allow an opportunity for understanding and to converse in a more casual way? So I came up with the idea of caring cards, which is a set of just like the size of a poker-sized set of cards. It's 52 questions, and they're about all aspects of someone's life, from childhood until present time. One of my favorites in the deck, which is the first one in the deck, is how do you know if someone loves you? And I'll never forget when I asked my mom that back then. She couldn't really answer it now, but she said, "Oh, that's easy. You feel it." And I said, well, what does it feel like? And she said, oh, it's warm and soft. So I would never have come up with that question, in the middle of lunch being agitated because she's asked me 10 times if we've ordered. But by having that card set with me in my purse or in my pocket, what it allows me to take off the caregiver hat. It allows me to move beyond the custodial conversations, to be her daughter, to build again that rapport of mother and daughter, or even two women in the moment. And it creates an opportunity to build that trust and relationship again. So you start conversing on this level of conversation, and then what happens is it allows you to then come in with conversations around these other things, planning and different things, and they don't feel so intrusive because you've been working on the relationship. The other thing is it just allows me to see her more dimensionally. So I learned a lot about her beyond the dimensions. She's sitting in front of me. Someone mentioned about Skyping. These are great for that. So you get on Skype, and I don't know about you, or I watch the people come visit at my mom's, and it's, hey, how you doing? You look great. Are you taking medication? How's the weather? And about 10 minutes in, everybody's starting to look like, oh, okay, well, I got to go, or, oh, everybody starts looking at their electronics. And so with something like this, you can sustain it. And then when you ask the questions, like some might be, who was your oldest living relative when you were a child, and what do you remember about them? Just follow the thread of conversations. One card might last 10 or 15 minutes. And it's wonderful. So that's the building of the relationship. And then the legacy, by either videotaping the responses, taking photographs, writing in a journal. Those are all ways that you can preserve their legacy. So I just feel like those are very important ways of being able to communicate, and that was my original goal. The cards, of course, have moved well beyond that of just people with dementia. They use them for hospice. They use them, scouts use them to engage with their elders. I mean, they're used by all kinds of people. So there's lots of uses for those. I have some other couple quick pointers, Kim. Should I do those first and then come back, or did you want to talk about carrying cards anymore, or what would you like?
No, I just want to show people can see them.
Oh, thank you.
Just the size of playing cards, and again, I've used them, shared them. They're great conversation starters, as Kathie said, in terms of just, around the dinner table after Thanksgiving. People scatter to go watch football or to go, just kind of be off on their own. But what a beautiful thing to start conversations around the dinner table, in addition to all the other great places that Kathie mentioned. So, yeah, I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you,
Kim. Thanks, Kathie.
Yep, and I've got a couple more. They're kind of on point there, and then we can open it up to other things. But the other thing is, oftentimes, whether someone has dementia or not, sometimes when we're with our elders, I don't know about you, but I hear people complain all the time about the repetitive stories, like they've heard the story a million times. And so something I did with my mom, she had a story she would always tell about every time we'd see a library or library sign or a bookcase of books, she'd tell me these 5 bullet points about when she was a child, and she'd go to the library with my aunt, her stepsister who was older. And it was so annoying to me because I'd hear the minute I saw a book, I think, oh, here it comes, right? We all have that tendency. So here's what I did. I thought, well, again, instead of get curious, not furious. So one day I took my notebook computer to her place and I said, Mom, you know that story you always tell me? Tell me more about it. So instead of resisting it, I surrendered to it and I said, what were you wearing? What kind of day was it? What do you remember smelling? What was it like going to the library? And we did a 2-page story on this 5 bullet point thing that she used to say. So when she started to repeat the stories after that, I just had this whole story that would unfold for me. And I saw her as a little girl, and I saw her walking there. So look for opportunities to connect, to really get to know them, to care, to want to know more. But it worked beautifully. And then the other thing too is just to really just learn to be in the moment. So often we feel like we have to fill every moment with conversations. So we're talking about conversations, and sometimes when we're with our loved one, we feel like if there's a down moment that we have to be doing something. Some of the most memorable moments I've had with my mom are looking at the clouds, or watching a bug land, on the little flower in front of her. Me taking my hands and putting them on the sides of her face, and she'll practically purr like a kitten and say, oh, that feels wonderful. It's about connecting. So we're talking a lot about it conversations, but again, a lot of the conversation transcends words. It's the way you show up. It's your being. It's your presence there. So be aware of that, that it's not all about the verbal. It's the communicating, and I just think that that's an important point.
Mm. Well said, Kathie. Well said. Yeah. So I just want to get to the chat as we're just come up to the top of the hour.
Yes.
And just be respectful. We so appreciate that everyone has been here. There's a couple of comments here, and Kathie, a couple of questions for you. So I wanted to ask them. Thomas asks, Kathie, any chance you have the electronic version of the cards, so access them from smartphone anywhere he is?
Well, Thomas, you know what? I actually thought of that, and then I talked myself out of it, and here's why. Because electronics are so pervasive, they're just everywhere, that even when people pick them up, their loved ones kind of look away. And so I wanted to do an iPhone app, and I thought, no, wait a minute. It gets back to sort of, oh, whoops, there's a text, or, oh, I'm going to just check this real quickly while I'm asking her this question. So I've specifically not done that so that we could get back to those simpler things. I put my phone away, be with the cards. You can do pick a card, any card. You can lay them out on the table. So I talked myself out of it for now because I think it really goes back to the simplest, purest, eye-to-eye, communication. So thank you for asking that. Great question.
Great. So Kathie, how can people get the cards and any other information and to connect with you?
Well, thanks, Kim. So it's caringcards.com and also then kathienitz.com, which is more my coaching and facilitating that with elder care, and then the caringcards.com. They're also available, through caringcards.com is the best option. And please feel free to reach out. Both of them have contact forms on them. Both websites do. And Kathie, it's with an IE, so it's Kathie Nitz, like Ritz with an N, so kathienitz.com. Feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. I would welcome your questions. And I'm so grateful that you showed up today. And Kim, I'm so grateful to you to pioneer this wonderful opportunity for you all to be able to learn things. And one quick thing I just want to say at the very end, there is one tip for any of you who do have people you're working with dementia, loved ones. There's an offer too for 10 tips for communicating with a person with dementia. It comes from the Family Caregiver Alliance, and that might be helpful for you as well. But it's been a privilege to be here, and I'm available for questions. And I don't know if you have anything else, Kim.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, I just people have been fantastic with the chats. Thomas said, the hopeful tone of all this is so great. I'm evaluating the need to move from San Francisco after 30 years back to Arizona where my mom is. The need for conversation is so important. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Thomas.
I love that word hopeful, because that really is, that gave me goosebumps actually, because that really is what it's all about. Yes, it's a sad journey, and yes, there's plenty of opportunities to be hopeful and to be proactive and to be loving and present and with your eyes and hearts wide open.
Great. And Uma says, ask, what's the energy I want to bring into this space or conversation before you visit with an elder?
1,000% I agree. So often I see people flying in on 2 wheels and they're checking their watch and everything. Take a moment, and that goes back to that vision. How do I want to be as a caregiver? How do I want to show up? Great point. Great.
Yeah. Alice, thank you. She says, thank you for this great session, Kim and Kathie. Thomas says, thanks, Kathie. I'm at a distance, so that's why I would like to have them no matter where I am. But I get it. Looking at your phone when in the presence of another closes down communication. Yeah.
It does. It creeps in, but I mean, get a set or reach out to me, and you can find a way to maybe have them on you as well. But I'm very grateful for all of your comments and all of your feedback, and hopefulness is it, and keep your eyes and heart wide open. Feel whatever you need to feel about it. Keep the conversation going, and as far as, and Kim, this with your own coaching, which we didn't really mention, but Coaching is done long distance. So for those of you who don't live locally, it's not all face-to-face. So, feel free to reach out to me, and I do give complimentary coaching sessions. So if you've got something that's a follow-up from this, please feel free to go on my website and fill out a contact form.
Great, great. Thank you, Kathie. Yeah, and take advantage. Kathie is a wealth of information and knowledge and strategies, as she just, really we shared just the tip of the iceberg. But so if you have additional questions or you want additional support, please, email Kathie, and she'll get you connected. So great. Well, Kathie, it certainly has been a pleasure having you. I think this is a vital conversation that, around the caregiver the journey with our elders and the conversations that you really provided some wonderful tips and strategies, and really coming from the heart, because as you say, a lot of times it's not about the doing, just the being and holding the space and being present is felt, regardless of whether it's our loved one with dementia or whether it's a fully functioning elder that we need to have these conversations with. So I so appreciate that and appreciate you, and thank you for that. So
well,
yeah.
Thank you for giving me the platform to be able to share that sort of more heart-based approach, because eyes wide open, but heart too. So thank you, Kim.
Great.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, so, hopefully, again, thank you all of you who joined us live, and those of you that need to watch the replay. I know it's 4 p.m. here on the East Coast, and I know it's the middle of the day for some of you that had work obligations, and then our fellow friends and colleagues over in Europe, it's the middle of the night. So I appreciate that folks will listen to the replay, and hope you'll join us next month. For my guest will be on March the 12th. It'll be back at 8 p.m. Eastern time. That's with Bart Windrum, and Bart is Bart's a great guy. I think we're going to have a lot of fun with him. He's actually a layperson turned patient advocate based on some difficult situations at the end-of-life care with both of his parents, and he's done a tremendous amount of research around the medical model and the end-of-life work. And he's written a book. Actually, it's called Notes from the Waiting Room. Managing a loved one's end-of-life hospitalization. And, just as a little teaser, as we all feel we need the advanced directives and things, that's just going to take care of, we have our healthcare proxy, our living will, and power of attorney and all that we feel like we're just in a great space. And, Bart's going to talk to us a little bit about maybe not so quickly, that they're always going to be honored. He's, throughout his journey, he's written, he's created some programs around 7 obstacles to dying in peace. So we'll be talking about some of those, and again, a real eye-opener from a lay person's perspective on things that are important for us and how we can advocate for ourselves and our loved ones around end of life, especially within the medical model. So join us for that. That should be a great conversation. And once again, Kathie, it's just been truly a pleasure. And, as I said in the beginning, and hopefully it came through, I know it came through to our listeners, that the heartfulness that you bring, with your journey and with your work. And so I'm just so grateful that we had this opportunity to kind of dive into that. So
thank you, Kim.
Great. Thank you. All right, everyone. Thanks again. And we look forward to seeing you next month. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.